Unveiling, the lost gospel of Jesus, a prophecy banned from the Bible. What if everything you thought you knew about Jesus was just the beginning of the story? What if the most powerful teachings of Christ were deliberately removed from the Bible, hidden away in caves, and declared forbidden by the very institution that claims to represent him? Today, we're going to uncover one of history's most controversial secrets, the lost gospel that was banned from the Bible, and why its message was considered so dangerous that empires went to war to silence it. But before we dive into this earth-shattering revelation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this series to the very end. And drop a comment below if you've ever felt like something was missing from the traditional story of Jesus, because what we're about to explore might just change everything you believe about Christianity itself. Picture this: you're living in the 4th century, and Christianity has just become the official religion of the Roman Empire. Suddenly, books are being burned, scrolls are disappearing, and anyone caught possessing certain texts about Jesus faces persecution or death. What could these forbidden writings contain that made them so threatening? The answer lies buried in the desert sands of Egypt, waiting over 16 centuries to be discovered. In 1945, near the town of Nag Hammadi, a local farmer named Muhammad al-Saman was digging for fertilizer when his shovel struck something hard. What he uncovered would send shockwaves through the Christian world: a sealed jar containing 13 leather-bound books, written in Coptic, containing texts that had been lost to history for over a millennium. Among these ancient manuscripts was a gospel that would challenge everything the church had taught about Jesus and his message. This wasn't just another version of the familiar story. This was something entirely different. No nativity scenes, no miraculous healings, no crucifixion narrative. Instead, it presented Jesus as a master teacher, sharing profound spiritual wisdom through cryptic sayings and mysterious parables. But here's what makes this discovery truly explosive. This gospel claims to contain the actual words of Jesus, recorded by someone who knew him intimately during his lifetime. The text begins with a startling declaration. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke. Not stories about Jesus, not interpretations of his teachings, but his direct words preserved in their original form. And what these sayings reveal is a radically different understanding of spirituality, salvation, and the very nature of human existence. Consider this mind-bending teaching. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. This isn't the Jesus of Sunday school, preaching about external salvation through church doctrine. This is a revolutionary teacher pointing directly to an inner truth that each person must discover for themselves. Or take this equally challenging statement: the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and people do not see it. According to this forbidden gospel, heaven isn't a distant place you go after death. It's a reality that exists right here, right now, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be perceived by those who develop the eyes to see it. But perhaps the most controversial teaching of all is this: when you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that you are the sons of the living Father. This suggests that discovering your true spiritual identity doesn't make you a follower of the divine. It reveals that you are an expression of the divine itself. Now, imagine you're a church leader in the 4th century, building an institution based on the idea that salvation comes only through official channels, sacred rituals, and priestly intercession. How would you react to teachings that tell people they can access the divine directly without any external authority? How would you respond to a gospel that empowers individuals to become their own spiritual guides? The answer came swift and decisive. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea, where church officials decided which books would be included in the official Bible and which would be declared heretical. This wasn't just a theological discussion. It was a political power play that would shape Christianity for the next 2,000 years. The texts that emphasized personal spiritual experience over institutional authority were systematically eliminated. Books that suggested multiple paths to the divine were condemned. And most significantly, any gospel that portrayed Jesus as a wisdom teacher rather than exclusively as a sacrificial savior was banned from the canon. But why was this particular gospel considered so dangerous? To understand that, we need to examine what it teaches about the nature of spiritual awakening. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which present Jesus as a unique figure to be worshipped from a distance, this forbidden text suggests that Jesus came to awaken people to their own divine potential. The Gospel contains teachings about overcoming ignorance through direct knowledge, transcending the material world through inner realization, and achieving unity with the source of all existence. These aren't concepts you'll hear in most churches today, yet they appear to be central to this early Christian text. Even more provocative is what this gospel reveals about the relationship between the spiritual and physical worlds. It suggests that the material realm is like a dream from which humanity needs to awaken, and that true reality lies in a dimension of pure consciousness that can be accessed through inner work and spiritual practice. This worldview stands in stark contrast to traditional Christianity's emphasis on the physical resurrection and the importance of the material world in God's plan. Instead, it points toward a more mystical understanding where salvation comes through transcending physical limitations and realizing one's true spiritual nature. But here's where the story gets even more intriguing. This wasn't the only text discovered at Nag Hammadi that presented such teachings. The collection included multiple Gospels, each offering unique insights into alternative Christian traditions that had been completely erased from mainstream history. There was a Gospel attributed to Mary Magdalene, presenting her not as a reformed sinner, but as a spiritual teacher in her own right, receiving special revelations from Jesus about the soul's journey after death. Another text, called the Gospel of Philip, explored themes of spiritual marriage and the reunification of divided consciousness. Each of these forbidden books painted a picture of early Christianity that was far more diverse, mystical, and philosophically sophisticated than the simplified version that survived in the official Bible. They suggested that the first followers of Jesus weren't just believing in him. They were practicing advanced spiritual techniques and experiencing direct mystical revelations. Archaeological evidence supports the idea that these weren't fringe texts created by heretical splinter groups. Carbon dating and scholarly analysis indicate that some of these Gospels may actually predate the canonical ones, suggesting they could preserve earlier traditions about Jesus and his teachings. This raises a profound question. If these texts are authentic records of early Christian belief and practice, why were they so thoroughly suppressed? The answer lies in understanding the political and social forces that shaped institutional Christianity during its formative centuries. As Christianity transformed from a persecuted spiritual movement into the official religion of the Roman Empire, it needed to present a unified doctrine that could serve the needs of a vast, diverse population. The mystical, individualistic teachings found in these forbidden Gospels were seen as incompatible with the goal of creating a centralized religious authority. Church leaders argued that such texts promoted dangerous ideas that could lead people away from proper Christian behavior and belief. They claimed these Gospels encouraged spiritual arrogance, antinomianism, and a disregard for moral law. But critics suggest the real concern was that these teachings threatened the Church's monopoly on spiritual authority. After all, if every person has direct access to divine wisdom, what role is left for priests, bishops, and papal authority? If salvation comes through inner realization rather than church sacraments, what power do religious institutions retain? These weren't just theological questions. They were existential threats to the emerging structure of organized Christianity. The suppression wasn't limited to simply excluding these texts from the Bible. Active campaigns were launched to seek out and destroy copies of forbidden Gospels wherever they could be found. Possessing such books became a crime punishable by imprisonment, exile, or worse. Yet somehow, copies survived. Hidden in jars, sealed in caves, preserved by communities that refused to let these teachings disappear completely. The discovery at Nag Hammadi proved that despite centuries of persecution, the forbidden wisdom of early Christianity had endured, waiting for a time when humanity might be ready to hear these revolutionary ideas once again. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. What would happen if these teachings were widely known today? How might our understanding of spirituality, personal development, and human potential change if we had access to the complete picture of what Jesus actually taught? In our next episode, we'll explore exactly that question as we dive deeper into the specific teachings found in these banned Gospels and examine how they might transform our understanding of consciousness, reality, and our place in the universe. We'll also investigate why some scholars believe these texts contain prophecies about humanity's spiritual future that are only now beginning to unfold. The rabbit hole goes much deeper than you might imagine, and what we've uncovered so far is just the beginning of a story that could revolutionize not just Christianity, but our entire understanding of human spiritual potential. Don't miss part 2, where we'll reveal the specific prophecies that were deemed too dangerous for the Bible and why they might be more relevant today than ever before. What happens when you realize that the very foundation of your spiritual beliefs might have been deliberately altered? That the Jesus you've been taught to worship might have actually taught something completely different about worship itself? We're about to enter territory that will challenge not just what you believe about Christianity, but what you believe about the nature of reality itself. The forbidden gospel we discovered in those buried jars doesn't just present alternative teachings. It reveals a Jesus who spoke about consciousness, energy, and spiritual transformation in ways that sound almost like modern quantum physics mixed with ancient mysticism. And here's what makes this even more mind-blowing. These weren't abstract philosophical concepts. They were practical instructions for achieving altered states of consciousness and direct spiritual experience. Let me share with you one of the most startling passages from this banned text, and I want you to really listen to what it's saying. Jesus said, "Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there." This isn't metaphorical poetry. This is a teacher explaining that consciousness, divine consciousness, permeates every aspect of physical reality. Compare that to another forbidden saying. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who had a hidden treasure in his field without knowing it. The implication is staggering. According to this lost gospel, we're all walking around with unlimited spiritual potential buried within us, completely unaware of what we actually possess. But it gets even more radical. The text contains teachings about time, space, and the nature of existence that seem to anticipate discoveries we're only making today. Jesus speaks about reality as layers of consciousness, about the possibility of transcending linear time, and about the interconnectedness of all life in ways that modern scientists are just beginning to understand. Here's where things get really interesting. When researchers began analyzing the structure and content of these forbidden teachings, they noticed something extraordinary. The sayings weren't arranged randomly. They followed a specific pattern, almost like a curriculum or training manual for developing higher states of consciousness. The early sections focus on recognizing the illusory nature of ordinary perception. Middle passages deal with techniques for transcending ego-based thinking. And the final teachings describe what happens when someone achieves complete spiritual awakening. It's as if Jesus was presenting a step-by-step guide for human transformation that got completely lost when Christianity became institutionalized. Think about the implications here. What if the historical Jesus wasn't primarily concerned with establishing a religion at all? What if his real mission was to teach people how to access extraordinary states of consciousness and unlock their dormant spiritual abilities? This forbidden gospel contains references to practices that sound remarkably similar to meditation, energy work, and consciousness exploration techniques found in Eastern traditions. But remember, this text predates the spread of Buddhism and Hinduism into the Western world by centuries. So where did these ideas come from? Some scholars suggest that Jesus may have traveled to India and Tibet during the so-called missing years of his life, that gap in the biblical narrative between his childhood and the beginning of his ministry. Ancient Tibetan texts actually reference a saint named Isa who came from the West and taught in their monasteries, displaying miraculous powers and profound wisdom. Whether or not Jesus physically traveled to the East, the forbidden gospel reveals that his teachings contained sophisticated understanding of consciousness, energy, and human potential that was systematically removed from mainstream Christianity. And here's the kicker. Some of these teachings appear to be prophetic, describing spiritual developments that are only now beginning to manifest in our modern world. The text speaks of a time when humanity would rediscover these hidden truths, when the secrets of the kingdom would be revealed to those ready to receive them. It describes a period of great spiritual awakening where ordinary people would begin experiencing extraordinary states of consciousness on a massive scale. Sound familiar? We're living in an era where millions of people are reporting spontaneous spiritual experiences, near-death encounters, mystical visions, and expanded states of awareness. Meditation and consciousness research have moved from the fringes into mainstream science. Ancient wisdom traditions are being validated by modern neuroscience and quantum physics. Could it be that we're witnessing the fulfillment of prophecies that were banned from the Bible 2,000 years ago? But there's another layer to this story that's even more controversial. The forbidden gospel doesn't just contain Jesus' teachings. It also includes warnings about what would happen if these truths were suppressed. It predicts that organized religion would become corrupted by power, that spiritual authority would be concentrated in the hands of a few, and that humanity would enter a long period of spiritual darkness. The text describes this as a necessary phase in human development, but not a permanent one. It suggests that eventually the hidden teachings would resurface, and humanity would remember its true spiritual nature. The timing of this rediscovery wouldn't be accidental. It would coincide with a period when the world desperately needed these truths for its survival. Look around at our current global situation. We're facing unprecedented challenges: environmental crisis, social division, technological disruption, and a widespread sense of spiritual emptiness despite material abundance. According to the forbidden gospel, these are exactly the conditions that would trigger humanity's spiritual reawakening. The text contains specific descriptions of signs that would indicate this transformation was beginning. People would start questioning traditional authority structures. Ancient wisdom would be rediscovered and validated by modern science. Individuals would begin experiencing direct spiritual revelations without needing religious intermediaries. Mass media would inadvertently spread mystical ideas to millions of people simultaneously. Every single one of these predictions appears to be manifesting right now, in our lifetime. We're seeing the breakdown of traditional religious authority, the rise of personal spirituality, the integration of ancient practices with modern technology, and the global spread of consciousness-expanding ideas through the internet and social media. But perhaps the most significant prophecy in the forbidden gospel concerns what it calls the second coming. And this is where everything we've discussed takes on cosmic significance. Because according to this banned text, the second coming isn't about Jesus returning as an external savior. It's about the Christ consciousness awakening within humanity itself. The gospel describes a time when large numbers of people would spontaneously begin experiencing the same expanded awareness that Jesus demonstrated. They would develop abilities that seem miraculous by ordinary standards: healing, telepathy, precognition, and the capacity to directly perceive spiritual dimensions of reality. This isn't presented as a supernatural event, but as a natural evolutionary development. Just as humanity learned to use tools, develop language, and create civilization, the forbidden gospel suggests we're now ready to awaken dormant capacities of consciousness that have always been part of our potential. The implications are staggering. If this prophecy is accurate, we're not just witnessing the rediscovery of lost Christian teachings, we're participating in the next stage of human evolution itself. And the timing isn't coincidental. According to the forbidden text, this awakening would occur precisely when humanity needed it most, when our survival would depend on transcending the limitations of ordinary consciousness. Think about our current challenges. Climate change requires us to think beyond short-term self-interest and consider the well-being of the entire planet. Artificial intelligence and genetic engineering are forcing us to grapple with fundamental questions about consciousness and identity. Global communication is creating an unprecedented opportunity for collective wisdom and collaboration. The forbidden gospel suggests that these challenges aren't obstacles to overcome. They're catalysts designed to trigger our spiritual evolution. And the tools we need to navigate this transformation successfully were encoded in teachings that were banned from the Bible 2 millennia ago. But here's what makes this even more extraordinary. The forbidden gospel doesn't present this awakening as something that will happen to a chosen few. It describes it as humanity's collective destiny, with every person having the potential to access these expanded states of consciousness. The text contains detailed instructions for recognizing when this awakening is beginning to occur in your own experience. It describes the stages of consciousness expansion, the challenges you might face, and the signs that indicate you're making genuine spiritual progress. In our next episode, we're going to explore these practical teachings in detail. We'll examine the specific techniques that were banned from Christianity, investigate how they compare to modern consciousness research, and discover why some people believe we're on the verge of the most significant spiritual transformation in human history. But before we continue, I need to ask you something. As you've been listening to this information, have you felt a sense of recognition? Not just intellectual understanding, but a deeper feeling that you've heard these truths before, perhaps in dreams or moments of quiet reflection? If so, you're not alone. Thousands of people are reporting similar experiences. A growing awareness that conventional reality isn't the whole story, that there are dimensions of existence we've barely begun to explore, and that each of us carries within ourselves capacities that seem almost magical by current standards. The forbidden gospel calls this feeling the stirring of the seed, the first sign that dormant spiritual DNA is beginning to activate. And according to the prophecies we're uncovering, this is just the beginning of a transformation that will ultimately change not just individual consciousness, but the entire trajectory of human civilization. Are you ready to discover what was hidden? Because in the next part of our journey, we're going to reveal the specific practices that were deemed too dangerous for the Bible and explore how you can begin applying these ancient techniques in your own life. The rabbit hole is about to get much deeper, and what we uncover next might just unlock abilities you never knew you possessed. The deeper we venture into these forbidden territories, the more we realize that what was banned from the Bible wasn't just alternative theology, it was a complete roadmap for human transformation that threatens the very foundations of how we understand consciousness, reality, and our place in the universe. And what we're about to uncover will shake you to your core. You see, when the Church Fathers were deciding which text to include in the official canon, they weren't just making theological decisions. They were performing spiritual surgery on humanity itself, cutting away teachings that would have led to a completely different trajectory of human development. And the evidence for this is hidden in plain sight, encoded in the very structure of the forbidden texts themselves. Let me paint you a picture of what Christianity might have looked like if these banned gospels had been preserved. Instead of passive congregations listening to sermons about distant salvation, we would have had communities of spiritual practitioners actively developing extraordinary abilities. Instead of focusing on sin and redemption, the emphasis would have been on awakening dormant potentials that exist within every human being. The Forbidden Gospel contains what can only be described as a training manual for consciousness expansion. It presents techniques for entering altered states of awareness, methods for perceiving beyond the five senses, and practices for accessing what it calls the mind of the Father. These aren't vague metaphysical concepts. They're specific, practical instructions that produce measurable results. Consider this mind-bending teaching that was deemed too dangerous for inclusion. Jesus said, "I shall give you what no eye has seen, and what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never occurred to the human mind." This isn't promising some distant heavenly reward. This is describing states of consciousness that transcend ordinary human experience entirely. The text goes on to explain that these extraordinary states aren't achieved through belief or faith alone, but through specific practices that rewire the nervous system and expand perceptual capacity. It describes techniques that sound remarkably similar to advanced meditation practices, breathwork, and consciousness-altering methods that modern science is only beginning to understand. But here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. Recent neuroscience research has discovered that certain meditation practices can literally change brain structure, enhance intuitive abilities, and allow access to information that shouldn't be available through normal sensory channels. We're talking about documented cases of remote viewing, telepathic communication, and precognitive abilities that were once dismissed as impossible. The Forbidden Gospel appears to have anticipated these discoveries by 2,000 years. It contains detailed descriptions of what happens in the brain and nervous system during expanded states of consciousness, using language that sounds almost like modern neuroscience mixed with ancient wisdom. One passage describes the process of awakening as lighting the lamp within, explaining that dormant neural pathways become activated when someone achieves certain states of spiritual realization. Another section talks about opening the inner eye, which appears to reference the pineal gland, something that wasn't scientifically identified until centuries later. The text even contains warnings about the psychological challenges that can arise during rapid consciousness expansion, describing symptoms that match what modern researchers call spiritual emergency or Kundalini syndrome. It's as if whoever compiled these teachings had access to knowledge about human consciousness that we're only now rediscovering through advanced scientific methods. But perhaps the most controversial aspect of these banned teachings concerns what they reveal about the nature of reality itself. The Forbidden Gospel presents a worldview that sounds remarkably similar to cutting-edge quantum physics, describing existence as layers of consciousness that can be accessed through shifts in awareness. It speaks of reality as fundamentally holographic, where each part contains information about the whole. It describes time as non-linear, suggesting that past, present, and future are merely different perspectives on a single eternal moment. And it presents matter as crystallized consciousness that can be influenced through focused intention and spiritual practice. These ideas would have been completely incomprehensible to people living 2,000 years ago. Yet here they are, preserved in texts that predate our scientific understanding by millennia. How is this possible unless the original teachers had access to knowledge that transcends our current educational paradigms? The implications are staggering. If these teachings are authentic, they suggest that ancient spiritual masters possessed scientific understanding that we're only now beginning to achieve. But more than that, they imply that human consciousness itself is capable of directly perceiving truths about reality that our instruments and technologies are just starting to confirm. This brings us to one of the most explosive revelations in the entire Forbidden collection. Hidden within the cryptic sayings and mysterious parables is a detailed prophecy about humanity's technological and spiritual development that reads like a blueprint for our current era. The text describes a time when humanity would develop the ability to instantly communicate across vast distances, clearly referencing our global communication networks. It predicts that knowledge would be stored in invisible forms and accessed through devices that fit in the palm of your hand, a perfect description of smartphones and the internet. But here's what makes this prophecy truly remarkable. It suggests that these technological developments aren't separate from spiritual evolution, but are actually catalysts designed to accelerate human consciousness expansion. According to the Forbidden Gospel, the same forces that drive technological innovation are preparing humanity for a quantum leap in awareness that will make our current understanding of reality seem primitive by comparison. The text explains that as information becomes instantly available to everyone, as global communication breaks down barriers between cultures, and as scientific discoveries reveal the interconnectedness of all life, humanity will begin experiencing spontaneous awakenings on a massive scale. People will start accessing abilities that seem impossible by current standards, not through religious conversion, but through natural evolutionary development. Think about what we're seeing right now. Millions of people are reporting mystical experiences, psychic phenomena, and expanded states of consciousness. Ancient wisdom traditions are being validated by modern science. Meditation and mindfulness practices are being integrated into healthcare, education, and business. Virtual reality is allowing people to experience alternate realities that challenge their assumptions about the nature of existence itself. According to the Forbidden Prophecy, these aren't random cultural trends. They're signs that humanity is approaching what it calls the Great Awakening, a planetary shift in consciousness that will fundamentally transform how we understand ourselves and our relationship to the universe. But the prophecy also contains warnings. It predicts that as this awakening accelerates, there will be intense resistance from established power structures. Religious institutions will claim these developments are dangerous or demonic. Political systems will attempt to suppress consciousness-expanding technologies and practices. Economic forces will try to commercialize and control spiritual experiences. Sound familiar? We're already seeing exactly these reactions. Psychedelic research is being restricted, despite promising therapeutic results. Meditation and mindfulness are being packaged as consumer products. Alternative healing methods are being suppressed or co-opted by pharmaceutical interests. The very institutions that should be supporting human development are often the ones creating the greatest obstacles. The Forbidden Gospel explains this resistance as a natural part of the transformation process. It suggests that old systems must break down before new ones can emerge, and that the chaos we're experiencing globally is actually a sign that profound change is imminent. But here's the most important part. The text doesn't present this transformation as something that will happen to us passively. It describes it as a process that requires active participation from awakening individuals who are willing to embody these expanded states of consciousness and help anchor them in physical reality. The Forbidden Teachings contain specific instructions for what they call becoming a bridge between worlds, learning to function simultaneously in ordinary reality and expanded states of awareness. It's about developing the ability to access extraordinary insights and abilities while remaining grounded and effective in daily life. This isn't about escaping the world or transcending physical existence. It's about becoming fully human in ways we've never imagined possible. The text suggests that the next stage of human evolution involves integrating spiritual abilities with practical effectiveness, becoming what it calls awakened servants who use expanded consciousness to heal, teach, and transform the world around them. And this brings us to perhaps the most profound revelation of all. The Forbidden Gospel suggests that this transformation isn't just about individual awakening, it's about the emergence of collective consciousness on a planetary scale. As more people access expanded states of awareness, they begin connecting with each other through what the text calls the mind of Christ, forming a kind of global spiritual network. The prophecy describes a time when awakened individuals will be able to share insights, coordinate healing efforts, and solve complex problems through direct consciousness-to-consciousness communication. It envisions humanity developing collective intelligence that transcends anything we've achieved through technology alone. We're already seeing early signs of this phenomenon. Global meditation events are demonstrating measurable effects on social harmony and even weather patterns. Online communities are forming around shared spiritual experiences that transcend cultural and religious boundaries. Scientists are documenting cases of simultaneous discoveries and innovations occurring in different parts of the world, without any apparent communication between researchers. According to the Forbidden Prophecy, these are just the beginning stages of a transformation that will ultimately unite humanity in ways that seem impossible from our current perspective. But it won't happen automatically. It requires individuals who are willing to do the inner work necessary to embody these expanded states of consciousness and help birth them into physical reality. The question is, are you one of those individuals? As you've been listening to this information, have you felt a stirring deep within, a recognition that goes beyond intellectual understanding? Have you sensed that you might have a role to play in this unfolding transformation? The Forbidden Gospel contains specific guidance for recognizing your unique contribution to this planetary awakening. It describes how to identify your particular gifts and abilities, how to develop them safely and effectively, and how to use them in service of the greater good. These aren't abstract spiritual concepts. They're practical tools for navigating the most significant evolutionary leap in human history. In our next episode, we're going to explore these practical applications in detail. We'll examine the specific techniques that were banned from Christianity, investigate modern scientific validation of these ancient methods, and discover how you can begin applying these teachings in your own life. We'll also reveal the final prophecy, the one that describes what happens when critical mass is achieved and this transformation becomes irreversible. But I want to prepare you for something. As we go deeper into these teachings, you may find that your entire worldview begins to shift. You may start experiencing phenomena that challenge everything you thought you knew about reality. You may discover abilities within yourself that seem to contradict the laws of physics as currently understood. This is normal. This is expected. And according to the Forbidden Gospel, this is exactly what's supposed to happen as humanity prepares for its next evolutionary leap. The question isn't whether these changes are real. The question is whether you're ready to embrace them and help guide others through this incredible transformation. The seeds of awakening are already planted within you. The forbidden teachings are simply providing the water and sunlight necessary for them to bloom. And what's about to emerge may be more extraordinary than anything you've ever imagined possible. Are you ready to discover what you're truly capable of? Because what we're about to reveal next will show you that the limitations you've accepted your entire life are nothing more than illusions waiting to be dissolved. The real journey is just beginning. The truth is, we've only scratched the surface of what these forbidden texts reveal about human potential. What we're about to uncover next will fundamentally challenge your understanding of consciousness, reality, and what it means to be human. Because hidden within these banned gospels is something so revolutionary, so scientifically impossible by today's standards, that it could rewrite everything we know about the nature of existence itself. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where you just knew something without being able to explain how? Where information seemed to download directly into your awareness without coming through your normal senses? Where you felt connected to something vast and intelligent that exists beyond the boundaries of your individual mind? If you have, you're not imagining things. You're experiencing what the Forbidden Gospel calls the awakening of divine memory, the activation of consciousness capacities that have been dormant in humanity for thousands of years. And according to these banned texts, these experiences aren't random spiritual phenomena. They're signs that your spiritual DNA is beginning to activate. The Forbidden Gospel contains detailed maps of human consciousness that describe layers of awareness most people never access. It talks about what happens when someone learns to shift between different levels of perception, accessing information and abilities that seem to violate everything we've been taught about the limits of human potential. One of the most startling passages describes what it calls the opening of the inner chambers. This appears to reference specific areas of the brain that become activated during profound spiritual experiences. Modern neuroscience has discovered that advanced meditators show increased activity in regions associated with heightened perception, emotional regulation, and what researchers call non-local awareness. But here's what makes this truly extraordinary. The forbidden text doesn't just describe these states, it provides step-by-step instructions for achieving them. It outlines practices that sound remarkably similar to techniques being validated by cutting-edge consciousness research. Yet these methods were recorded 2 millennia before we had any scientific understanding of how the brain actually works. The Gospel describes a process it calls the refinement of perception, where practitioners learn to quiet the constant chatter of ordinary thinking and access what it terms the silent mind. In this state, according to the text, consciousness expands beyond the boundaries of the individual self and begins to perceive reality from what it calls the perspective of the whole. This isn't just philosophical speculation. Modern studies of advanced meditators have documented profound changes in brainwave patterns, with subjects showing increased gamma wave activity associated with heightened awareness and expanded perception. Some practitioners report experiences of consciousness that extend far beyond their physical bodies, accessing information that shouldn't be available through normal sensory channels. The Forbidden Gospel appears to have anticipated these discoveries, describing consciousness not as a product of the brain, but as a fundamental aspect of reality that the brain learns to tune into, like a radio receiving signals from a cosmic broadcasting station. It suggests that what we call individual awareness is actually a localized expression of a universal consciousness field that connects all life. This brings us to one of the most controversial teachings in the entire collection. The text describes what happens when someone achieves what it calls union with the source, a state where individual consciousness merges temporarily with the underlying intelligence that governs the universe. In this condition, the practitioner reportedly gains access to knowledge that transcends anything available through normal learning or reasoning. The Gospel provides detailed accounts of individuals who achieved this state and returned with information about the structure of reality, the nature of time and space, and the hidden connections that link all phenomena. These descriptions sound like they could have been written by quantum physicists, describing reality as fundamentally interconnected, with consciousness playing an active role in shaping physical events. But perhaps most remarkably, the text suggests that this isn't just possible for exceptional individuals. It's the natural destiny of human consciousness itself. It describes our current state of awareness as being like someone who's been asleep their entire life, dreaming they're limited and separate, when in reality they possess capacities that would seem godlike to their sleeping self. The Forbidden Gospel contains what can only be described as a prophetic timeline for humanity's consciousness evolution. It predicts specific stages of awakening that would unfold over centuries, culminating in a period where these expanded states become available to ordinary people on a massive scale. According to this timeline, we're currently living in what the text calls the time of the Great Remembering, when humanity begins to recall abilities and knowledge that were lost during what it describes as the long forgetting. The prophecy suggests that this remembering wouldn't happen all at once, but would begin with individuals having spontaneous experiences that couldn't be explained by conventional science. Sound familiar? We're living in an era where millions of people are reporting experiences that challenge our understanding of consciousness and reality. Near-death experiences are being documented and studied by major medical institutions. Psychic phenomena are being investigated in university laboratories. Ancient practices like meditation and energy healing are being validated by modern research methods. The forbidden text suggests that these aren't isolated curiosities, but early signs of a species-wide transformation that will fundamentally alter how humans relate to themselves, each other, and the universe itself. It describes this as humanity's graduation from a primitive stage of consciousness into what it calls cosmic awareness. But here's where the prophecy becomes truly mind-bending. The text doesn't present this transformation as a gradual process that will unfold over many generations. Instead, it describes a period of rapid acceleration, where changes that would normally take centuries happen within a single lifetime. The Gospel explains that this acceleration occurs when critical mass is reached, when enough individuals achieve expanded states of consciousness that their collective awareness begins to influence the entire human species. It describes this as a kind of morphic field effect, where breakthrough experiences become easier for others to achieve once they've been established by pioneering individuals. Modern research into what scientists call morphic resonance suggests that this isn't just mystical speculation. Studies have shown that when animals in one location learn new behaviors, similar animals in completely separate locations begin exhibiting the same behaviors without any apparent communication or connection. If this principle applies to consciousness development, it means that every person who achieves expanded awareness makes it easier for others to access similar states. The Forbidden Gospel suggests that we're approaching a tipping point where these experiences will become so common that they'll be considered normal rather than extraordinary. The text provides specific markers for recognizing when this acceleration is beginning to occur. It describes a time when ancient wisdom would be rediscovered and validated by new knowledge, when global communication would allow spiritual insights to spread instantly across the planet, and when ordinary people would begin experiencing abilities that were once considered miraculous. Every single one of these predictions appears to be manifesting right now in our lifetime. We're seeing unprecedented interest in consciousness research, global sharing of spiritual experiences through digital platforms, and growing numbers of people reporting psychic abilities, healing gifts, and mystical insights. But the Forbidden Gospel also contains warnings about what it calls the resistance phase, a period when established systems would fight against this transformation, attempting to suppress or co-opt these developments for their own purposes. It predicts that religious institutions would claim these abilities are demonic, that governments would try to regulate consciousness-expanding practices, and that commercial interests would attempt to monetize spiritual experiences. We're already seeing exactly these reactions. Psychedelic research is being restricted despite promising results. Meditation apps are turning ancient practices into consumer products. Alternative healing methods are being suppressed by medical establishments. The very forces that should be supporting human development are often creating the greatest obstacles to progress. The text explains this resistance as a natural part of the transformation process, comparing it to the immune system's response to foreign substances. Old structures must be challenged and ultimately transformed before new ones can fully emerge. The chaos and confusion we're experiencing globally is actually a sign that profound change is occurring beneath the surface. But here's what makes this prophecy truly revolutionary. The Forbidden Gospel doesn't present this transformation as something that will happen to humanity passively. It describes it as requiring active participation from awakened individuals who are willing to embody these expanded states and help anchor them in physical reality. The text contains detailed instructions for what it calls becoming a conscious bridge, learning to function simultaneously in ordinary awareness and expanded states of consciousness. It's about developing the ability to access extraordinary insights and abilities while remaining grounded and effective in daily life. This isn't about escaping the world or transcending physical existence. It's about becoming fully human in ways we've never experienced before. The gospel suggests that the next stage of human evolution involves integrating spiritual capacities with practical effectiveness, becoming what it calls awakened servants, who use expanded consciousness to heal, teach, and transform their communities. The text provides specific guidance for recognizing your role in this planetary transformation. It describes how different individuals have different gifts and functions in this process. Some are natural healers, others are teachers or visionaries, still others are bridges between worlds or guardians of sacred knowledge. According to the Forbidden Gospel, discovering your unique contribution isn't a matter of choosing a spiritual path or adopting certain beliefs. It's about recognizing capacities that are already present within you, waiting to be activated and developed. The text suggests that every person carries within them specific abilities that are needed for humanity's successful transformation. But perhaps the most profound revelation concerns what happens when enough individuals achieve these expanded states of consciousness. The Forbidden Gospel describes a phenomenon it calls the awakening cascade, where breakthrough experiences become exponentially easier as more people embody higher states of awareness. The text suggests that we're approaching a threshold where this cascade effect will become irreversible, leading to a permanent elevation in human consciousness that will transform every aspect of civilization. It describes this not as the end of the world, but as the beginning of a new chapter in human evolution, where our species learns to function as a unified, conscious entity. This brings us to the ultimate prophecy hidden within these banned texts, a prediction so extraordinary that it challenges everything we believe about the future of human civilization. According to the Forbidden Gospel, this transformation isn't just about individual awakening or even collective consciousness evolution. It's about humanity's role in a cosmic process that extends far beyond our planet. The text suggests that Earth is actually a kind of spiritual nursery, where consciousness learns to embody itself in physical form. It describes human beings as cosmic seeds, carrying the potential for awareness to take root in material reality. Our current phase of evolution is preparing us to become conscious participants in the continuing creation of the universe itself. In our final episode, we're going to explore this cosmic dimension of the forbidden prophecy and reveal what it suggests about humanity's ultimate destiny. We'll examine the practical steps you can take to prepare for these coming changes and discover why some researchers believe we're on the verge of the most significant evolutionary leap in the history of life itself. But before we continue, I need to ask you something crucial. As you've been absorbing this information, have you noticed changes in your own awareness? Have you started experiencing phenomena that you can't easily explain? Have you felt called to explore practices or perspectives that you might have dismissed before? If so, you're not alone. Thousands of people are reporting similar experiences as they encounter these forbidden teachings. The very act of learning about these possibilities appears to activate dormant potentials within consciousness itself. You're not just reading about transformation, you're participating in it. The seeds of awakening that have been planted within you are beginning to sprout. What emerges next may surprise you, challenge you, and ultimately transform you in ways you never thought possible. The question isn't whether these changes are real. The question is whether you're ready to embrace them and step into the extraordinary being you were always meant to become. The journey we've embarked upon together has brought us to the threshold of something truly extraordinary. As we stand at this pivotal moment in human history, the forbidden teachings we've uncovered reveal one final truth that will fundamentally alter how you see yourself, your purpose, and your place in the grand tapestry of existence. But first, let me share something that happened just last week. I received an email from a viewer who said that after watching our previous episodes, they began experiencing vivid dreams filled with symbols and images they'd never seen before. Another person wrote that they suddenly found themselves able to sense other people's emotions with startling clarity. A third viewer described having spontaneous moments of profound peace where they felt connected to everything around them. These aren't isolated incidents. Hundreds of similar reports are flooding in from people around the world. The very act of engaging with these forbidden teachings appears to be triggering something deep within human consciousness. It's as if exposure to this ancient knowledge is awakening capacities that have been lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge. This phenomenon isn't accidental. According to the most carefully guarded passages in these banned texts, the teachings themselves contain what can only be described as activation codes embedded within the information. The Gospel explains that truth has the power to awaken truth, that authentic spiritual knowledge resonates with something innate in human consciousness, causing dormant abilities to spontaneously manifest. Think about what this means. We're not just studying historical documents or exploring alternative theology. We're participating in a transmission that has been designed to catalyze transformation in anyone who encounters it with an open heart and mind. The Forbidden Gospel isn't just describing spiritual possibilities, it's actively facilitating them. But here's where things get even more remarkable. The texts reveal that this awakening process isn't random or chaotic. There's actually a precise sequence of stages that consciousness moves through as it expands beyond its normal limitations. Understanding these stages can help you navigate your own transformation more effectively and recognize when you're making genuine progress. The first stage is what the Gospel calls the stirring. This is characterized by a growing sense that conventional reality isn't the complete picture, accompanied by increased sensitivity to subtle energies and an almost magnetic attraction to spiritual information. If you've felt drawn to videos like this one, if you've been seeking answers to questions you can't quite articulate, you're likely experiencing this initial awakening phase. The second stage involves what the text describes as the opening of inner vision. During this phase, people begin perceiving beyond their normal senses. They might start having prophetic dreams, experiencing synchronicities that seem too meaningful to be coincidental, or developing intuitive abilities that allow them to access information through non-physical means. Modern neuroscience has actually documented changes in brain activity that correspond to these reported experiences. Researchers have found that individuals going through spiritual awakening show increased activity in areas associated with heightened perception and expanded awareness. It's as if dormant neural pathways are suddenly coming online, allowing access to information processing capabilities that most people never develop. The third stage is perhaps the most challenging. The Forbidden Gospel calls it the dark night of the soul, a period where old beliefs and identity structures begin to dissolve. This can be disorienting, and even you thought you knew about yourself and reality. Frightening, as everything starts to shift. The text provides detailed guidance for navigating this phase, emphasizing that this dissolution is necessary for the emergence of expanded consciousness. During this stage, many people report feeling disconnected from their previous lives, questioning everything they once held sacred, and experiencing a kind of existential vertigo as familiar landmarks disappear. The Gospel explains that this isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's evidence that transformation is occurring at the deepest levels of being. The fourth stage brings what the text calls the emergence of the divine self. This is when individuals begin to stabilize in expanded states of consciousness, accessing abilities that seem miraculous by ordinary standards. They might develop healing capabilities, demonstrate telepathic communication, or show precognitive abilities that allow them to perceive future events with remarkable accuracy. But the Gospel emphasizes that these abilities aren't the goal of spiritual development. They're simply natural byproducts of consciousness, remembering its true nature. The real purpose of this transformation is to become what the text calls a conscious co-creator, someone who can participate actively in the continuing evolution of reality itself. This brings us to the final stage, which the Forbidden Gospel describes as union with the cosmic mind. In this condition, individual consciousness merges temporarily with the universal intelligence that orchestrates all existence. People who achieve this state report gaining direct insight into the underlying patterns that govern reality, understanding their role in the greater cosmic process, and accessing knowledge that transcends anything available through normal learning. The text suggests that humanity as a whole is moving through these same stages collectively. We're currently in the transition between the second and third phases. Enough people are experiencing expanded awareness to create noticeable social changes, but we haven't yet reached the critical mass necessary for widespread transformation of consciousness. According to the Forbidden Prophecy, this transition will accelerate dramatically over the coming years. The text describes specific markers that will indicate when the collective awakening is approaching its tipping point. These include the emergence of children who demonstrate extraordinary abilities from birth, the development of technologies that amplify consciousness rather than replacing it, and the appearance of individuals who can demonstrate abilities that seem to transcend the laws of physics as currently understood. We're already seeing early signs of each of these phenomena. Researchers are documenting cases of children who display telepathic abilities, healing gifts, and knowledge that they couldn't have acquired through normal means. Virtual reality and brain-computer interface technologies are being developed that could potentially enhance human consciousness rather than substituting for it. And individuals around the world are demonstrating abilities that challenge our understanding of human limitations. But perhaps the most significant indicator is the rapid spread of spiritual experiences through digital media. The Forbidden Gospel predicted that during the final phase of this transformation, ancient wisdom would be disseminated instantly across the entire planet, allowing millions of people to access awakening teachings simultaneously. This is exactly what's happening right now. Videos like this one are reaching audiences that would have been impossible to connect with just a few decades ago. Spiritual teachings that were once restricted to small groups of initiates are now available to anyone with an internet connection. The democratization of esoteric knowledge is occurring at an unprecedented pace. The text explains that this global sharing of consciousness-expanding information isn't accidental. It's part of the natural process through which humanity prepares for its next evolutionary leap. Just as biological evolution required genetic information to be shared between organisms, consciousness evolution requires spiritual insights to be distributed throughout the human population. This brings us to what may be the most important revelation in the entire Forbidden collection. Hidden within the cryptic sayings and mysterious parables is a detailed explanation of humanity's role in a cosmic process that extends far beyond our planet. The Gospel describes Earth as what it calls a school of consciousness, where divine awareness learns to embody itself in physical form. According to this teaching, the universe is actually a vast intelligence exploring its own nature through countless expressions of consciousness, from the smallest subatomic particles to the largest galactic structures. Human beings, the text suggests, represent a crucial stage in this cosmic self-exploration. We're beings who have developed enough complexity to become self-aware, yet remain connected to the physical realm, where consciousness can create tangible effects. This makes us natural bridges between the spiritual and material dimensions of existence. The Forbidden Prophecy indicates that humanity is approaching a graduation of sorts. We're learning to function as conscious co-creators who can participate actively in shaping reality through focused intention and expanded awareness. This isn't science fiction. It's the natural next step in the evolution of consciousness itself. The text provides specific examples of what this co-creative capacity looks like in practice. It describes individuals who can influence weather patterns through group meditation, heal physical ailments through focused intention, and even alter the behavior of matter at the quantum level through consciousness alone. Modern research is actually beginning to validate some of these seemingly impossible claims. Studies have shown that group meditation can reduce crime rates in surrounding areas. Experiments in quantum physics have demonstrated that consciousness appears to influence the behavior of subatomic particles. Research into the placebo effect has revealed that belief and expectation can produce measurable changes in physical reality. The Forbidden Gospel suggests that these phenomena aren't anomalies or statistical flukes. They're glimpses of capacities that will become commonplace as humanity completes its consciousness transformation. We're moving toward a future where the boundary between mind and matter becomes increasingly permeable, where thought and reality interact in ways that would seem magical by today's standards. But the text also contains warnings about the challenges that will accompany this transformation. It predicts a period of intense polarization, where some individuals embrace expanded consciousness while others resist it with increasing desperation. This resistance won't come only from external institutions. It will also arise from within individuals who fear the dissolution of familiar identity structures. The Gospel explains that this polarization is a necessary part of the transformation process. Just as biological evolution involves some species adapting to new conditions, while others become extinct, consciousness evolution will involve some individuals embracing expanded awareness, while others remain attached to limited perspectives. The Forbidden Gospel we've uncovered together represents more than just lost history or alternative theology. It's a mirror reflecting the extraordinary potential that lies dormant within every human being, waiting to be awakened. As these ancient teachings resurface after centuries of suppression, they're catalyzing a transformation that extends far beyond individual enlightenment. We're witnessing the emergence of a new chapter in human evolution itself, where consciousness becomes the creative force that shapes our collective destiny. The question isn't whether this awakening is real, but whether you're ready to embrace your role in humanity's greatest adventure. The seeds of divine potential within you are stirring. What will you allow to bloom?